Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Tuesday, terrible Tuesday, August 19th, the year of our Lord 2025. And you are listening to Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate I just want to give a shout out, thank you, whatever, to all the listeners out there. You guys have really done a great job. Um, just watching the videos, man, especially on YouTube, and podcast numbers are great, and man, I'm flattered and thrilled that I get to talk with you folks each and every day right here on Coffee with JC Shurburtt. So thank you so much for doing that. It's a mock game week at South Carolina, which means good for all of us. There's some press conferences that go on. Players and Shane Beamer today, coordinators tomorrow. So there will be media availability. I'm sure Beamer will have some things to say about the second scrimmage, along with some of the players. That'll all be going on during the morning show and the show later today. So take a break, listen to Beamer, come back, we'll talk about it, that kind of thing. John Strickland is in on the morning show this morning. He has one final preseason Tuesday, and then he switches to Fridays for Inside the Gamecocks, the pregame show. Once again, on Fridays, we will have one long combined pregame show, 3 hours long, to close out your week. We'll do that during the football season, and then Fridays we'll split again once football's over, but certainly looking forward to that. Don't forget, four-quarter Friday, high school football kicks off in the state of South Carolina for real this Friday night. Justin Hall, Steve Hall, they will have all of that for you right there, 9 a.m. Friday. So we're going through a mock game week ourselves. No tailgate show, no rooster rant, and we'll have the Labor Day weekend schedule out for you on that. Starting Labor Day, we take Labor Days off at Chief because, that Monday, well, this year I'll be traveling. 2 years ago I was traveling. But it's to kind of give Phil, our producer, the Mad Dog, and Jamie and everybody else that works every day, a day off. If we don't take holidays off, it's kind of a slippery slope kind of thing. But we'll have plenty of coverage from South Carolina, Virginia Tech with Rooster Rant, and then get back in the swing of things the following week, and then it's back to normal schedule, full blown. Whatever, SEC Sunday night's coming up on Sunday. We have JC and Morgan this week, I think tomorrow morning. No coffee on Friday. Maybe not Thursday. No, wait a minute. No coffee on Thursday. I have to have a situation. I've told you about it, and it's hope to be back in the swing of things Friday morning with coffee. Just kind of depends on the drugs wearing off, how I feel, all that good stuff. So I will keep you posted. Go to chiefsportsnetwork.com for our daily schedule. Also follow Chief Sports on Instagram, and you can get all the times every day. Also Inside the Gamecocks on Instagram for our Gamecock shows. Lots going on at the Chief Sports Network. Also on thebigspur.com. Use code the show 50 to get half off your first annual membership, or if you want to pay full price, obviously Paramount Plus comes with that as well. All right, didn't mean to talk 4 minutes about previewing and schedules and all that good stuff, but we call it house cleaning, and I wanted to get that done right away here on Coffee. Yesterday it continues to be a lot of positivity coming out of the football building, the Rice Football Complex, the Long Operations Center, whatever you want to call it. Stephen Jerry Spurrier Indoor, if you will. And it's kind of a little bit of an unprecedented thing, but we've talked about how at some point, this program's got to handle expectations, lose players, and keep going and moving forward. So don't, the national media, some people are like a huge draw. I read somewhere on CBS or something. And the writer, I don't know, I'm not sure about his takes on South Carolina. I'm not putting any validity on it, but, he said, well, I have a major slide, and maybe, maybe, I mean, it's one of those things where if roster is all you have to go on. It's a tough job covering college football nationally now because of the transition, and you don't really have the security blanket of recruiting rankings in many instances. And then there's also, of course, the whole natural thing where recruiting rankings are 60% accurate. So I get it. It's very tempting to look at programs like Auburn and Texas A&M and M and Florida and traditional. I don't want to. I mean, I think Gamecocks. We kind of look at A&M maybe is better than they are, considering a 2-9 record against those guys, and they recruit really well every year and have money. And Carolina needs to end that streak at Kyle Field pretty soon. But they're always mentioned, but they haven't quite had that breakthrough year since 2012 when they went 11-2 with Johnny Football. But it's easy to look at those rosters and say, hey, well, these guys were this guy did this at this school, this guy did that. But if you kind of read I guess the reports from the people that are there every day and cover it, there's question marks at just about every school. I mean, I mentioned yesterday on the show, I believe that Juan Gaston, true freshman offensive guard at Georgia, is probably going to start at offensive guard for them this year because he's the best one. Similar to the Shed Surratt talk at South Carolina. So, I mean, if Georgia can start a true freshman offensive guard, so can the Gamecocks. I don't know that Gaston, I think he was ranked higher than Shed, but not by much. When all was said and done, Gamecocks recruited him. Actually, we're second there. There's a lot of players on Georgia's roster where the Gamecocks were second. But so everybody's going through it, and everybody's kind of hard to pin down. It's what we think, what we know, and all that. But you're going to get that. And I'm not saying anybody's wrong. I'm just saying I'm a little more bullish when you dive into the roster on both sides of the ball than perhaps I was. There are concerns. I mentioned some concerns yesterday coming out of the second scrimmage, but they're very minimal compared to where other preseasons have been, not just under Shane Beamer, but for a long, long time. I think that, another kind of security blanket that we all use sometimes is like, what did they, with the portal, what they do with the other school? And when you kind of look into it, there have been guys that have done well at other schools that have come in from the portal and been good, no matter what the level of play that they were at. Juice Wells caught a bunch of passes at James Madison. He caught a bunch of passes at South Carolina his 1 year. Spencer Rattler had a really good 2020 at Oklahoma, came in and did what he did. Rocket Sanders, here's a big example. But for every guy like that, there's also a Kyle Kennard and a Demetrius Knight, a Mario Anderson, who actually was productive at Newberry, but you wonder. He came in and did pretty well. Josh Simon had his best football when he got to South Carolina. So there's examples like that too when you talk about the transfer portal. Yeah, outside of Surratt, South Carolina, really, there's not a lot of true freshmen. And the receivers, of course. The receivers are almost in their own category when you talk about the 2025 class and the freshmen and all that. But outside of Surratt and the freshman receivers, and Carolina's probably not relying on a ton of freshmen this year. Christian Ingram could probably get in the mix at D tackle, but he's still learning and developing. But he's 6'6", 315, 310. He's a big old dude. And certainly a good pickup late for the Gamecocks in recruiting. But yeah, they're not going to be counting on a lot of freshmen this year. That's kind of a little different, at least in the two deep. There's normally a smattering, sprinkling, if you will, of true freshmen. That's probably not going to be the case this year, but some of these guys that have come in as true freshmen and played well in spring and now in fall, they're going to help special teams. So that's a good thing with that. I think we're 1 day from my annual special teams freak out on the show, by the way. So stay tuned for that. But Yeah, things have been positive around Gamecock land, and we talked a lot about the offense yesterday, and it was reiterated to me a couple of times that just how well it's functioned. On offense, there's plays and designs and assignments and a lot of mental things you have to kind of get involved with, and it's one of those things where it takes some time during practice. That's why you practice. And I don't know of a single coach on offense that's there's not there's too much time to prepare, right? Maybe Steve Spurrier, I'm ready to go play, but listening to Pat DeMarco on the morning show, and by the way, that's a great interview. You can check it out on our YouTube channel, Chief Sports South Carolina. He was asked about Shula. Jamie asked him specifically about Shula because Pat, when he was with the Falcons during that time period, they played the Panthers twice a year. Now Pat's on offense, not on defense, but he gets a good a good go of it, a good idea. And one thing he said, it was a very good nugget, is that Shula's a lot like Spurrier in the sense that what Spurrier would do is he'd find a handful of plays and rep them over and over and over and over again. Yeah, Dowell Loggins, I never really heard much about like that what he did there. I know the guy before Dowell Loggins was not like that. It was described to me as some play callers are artists, some are engineers, and the engineers like to kind of tinker and not necessarily tinker. There's no base. It's like a hodgepodge. It's all they're always kind of trying to reinvent things, which is weird because if you think engineers have to be specific and exact, like in real life, and artists are kind of all over the place sometimes, messy. But that was specific to game day play calling and things like that. But what I've heard about Shula is it's more about, and he said this publicly, and he'll probably say it again on Wednesday. It's like getting really, really good at what you do best, getting the plays that work, and then building from there. And what Spurrier did, and I'm not saying Mike Shula is going to be Steve Spurrier as a play caller because you can't compare Steve Spurrier to anybody. He's his own guy. But I think that that practice philosophy works very, very well in college football. Um, and obviously, from what Pat heard with the Panthers and witnessed, that's kind of what they did there too, which is really when Shula had his best run play calling. And that's not quarterback development. That's not all the other things that Mike Shula brings to the table. It's just game planning, play calling, all that good stuff. But enough about the offense. We've talked a bunch about it, and it's ahead of where it was. I think that's the bottom line. The entire program, the entire team is probably ahead. And people straight up told me this of where they have been in previous years. I don't know how that translates. That's something that affects outcomes of games. It probably can affect how you start too, start a season. But everybody else has players. Like I just went over, everybody else has issues. Let's kick it off, man. We've talked it to death. And speaking of what we talked to death on defense, we've talked about the D tackles and the D line a whole lot. So we're going to start with the secondary. Now, this is one of those things that in the preseason at times, um, you see a lot of players that are good coming back. And you just kind of say, well, that's a good spot. They brought in Brandon Cisse and Miles Norwood at corner from the portal. Congrats to Jelon Kilgore, was named a Associated Press All-American in the preseason. That's something. He and Dylan Stewart. He's a good player. I mean, he probably gets overlooked a little bit, but he's returning. He's been on some NFL draft boards. He's always been good since he stepped on campus as a true freshman. Played a whole lot his entire time here. But you have Kilgore back. You brought in Cisse, Vakari Swain's back, Judge Collier's back. But they did lose their best player, probably the best player on the defense, a absolute freak in Nicky Manware. And so you got to replace him. Now, Peyton Williams has had a strong offseason. David Busey's had a strong offseason. Those are the guys you're kind of looking at. And then at the other safety, you do have DQ Smith. Kelvin Hunter is another safety back there, kind of in that four deep spot. So you're not going to have a Nick back there. That's just how it is. But can Peyton Williams play at a high level, and can Carolina be good at safety? Absolutely. And then the corners, Cisse and Collier would be my projected starters right now. But Bakari Swain, since he's been back, has been outstanding. So maybe not. Uh, Maybe they get them all three on the field at the same time in some creative manner. I know what will not happen is Jelon Kilgore taking a safety spot. Now, and I say that caveat here, if there's injuries, maybe that is a move they have to make. But right now, they're healthy and ready to go. So that's not happening. I know a lot of people talk about that, but that's not happening unless it's a certain like special set or whatever. They like Kilgore at nickel. Nickel's an important part of this defense when you run a 4-2-5. As we saw under Ellis Johnson when he kind of ran this alignment. Now, this is a different defense than what Ellis did because they'll switch to three-man front and things like that. Um, Devontae Holloman, Antonio Allen, obviously important players. You can go all the way back to Rashad Faison under Charlie Strong. Now, Charlie ran a 3-3-5, but that spur position, that 50, I mean, that's an important spot. Emmanuel Cook played that spot. So, all those guys really, really good. Darian Stewart, I think, played some at that spot. So it's been kind of a glory position at South Carolina really since 2000. And they call it a nickel now. They called it a spur before. Um, so yeah, I think with that 5 DB look, that's too important of a spot. And we saw in the Mississippi State game in 2023 when those safety spots and nickel spot aren't aligned. Like if you have a guy playing nickel that is not ideal there, and then I mean, they can. Mississippi State threw for a bunch of yards that night. Carolina won the game, but they were the fast receiver they had streaking towards the end zone all night long. Was it Will Rogers? Was that his name? Went to Washington eventually. But the secondary does look pretty strong. Everything I've heard preseason camp wise is it's the strength of the defense, and it's not surprising. Judge Collier is going to take a step forward. Brandon Cisse is a really good player. I think Bakari Swain takes a step forward. DQ Smith is a player that a lot of folks have talked about. And then you have Peyton Williams back there as well. So I'm curious to see how it all works out, who gets on the field. Obviously, there's kind of a logjam at corner. Miles Norwood is another really good player, along with Jalewis Solomon at corner. So they've got depth back there at the cornerback position. Torian Gray, man, he just keeps stacking recruits. And if you're highly rated, he'll develop you. If you're not highly rated, he'll develop you. That's it. I'm bullish on the linebackers. I think there's a good four-man rotation now. Not quite sure who the fifth one would be. Maybe Donovan Darden, a true freshman, because after the four, there's true freshmen. So Jerron Willis looks like he's going to play some this year, maybe a lot. You have Fred Johnson, J.R. Johnson. You have Sean Murphy and Justin Okoronkwo. Those guys, they're not chopped liver. I've talked about them. That's a good group. I think that I'll continue to say I think there's a possibility, as crazy as it sounds, after losing a player like Demetrius Knight and Bam Martin Scott, Debo Williams, who was a staple on the defense. It may not happen early on, but I think eventually you're going to see this linebacking core is better than last year's. No offense to last year's linebacking core. It was fine. It was fast. Certainly wasn't a liability because we all sat around and kind of, I mean, sometimes criticism of the linebackers was unfair. You maybe had a young guy in there that is playing slow because he's unsure, and that can kill you at linebacker. And that could kill that if there's something that could happen that's a detriment, that's maybe not as good, it'll be mental mistakes early. So everybody that likes to disagree and is concerned about the linebackers, just get ready. There'll be some times I look dumb early in the season. I promise you, these guys aren't any good. Well, they're just playing slow because they're unsure. But in time, I think this linebacking core will be good, and it needs to be good relatively early. I've said it before. The entire same goes for the entire defense because you got drones, you got Pavia, you got Bo Priblia at Missouri. All are dual threat guys that can, if your linebacker's out of position, they're going to tuck it and run and kill you. So it needs to be at least to some level early. I think for the Gamecocks to get through the first 5 games. I mean, a lot of folks talk about these first 5 games as if they're givens and that they would be disappointed if they don't. It's full of landmines, man, especially early in a season. And with the way that Vandy game sets up, the only good thing about it is at night because there's a scenario where South Carolina beats Virginia Tech and then Vandy goes to Lane Stadium, and that game's at night too. So Vandy's going to be a little bit battle tested coming into Williams-Brice. And Virginia Tech gets up off the mat, beats them, gets revenge for last year. And then everybody's just thinking you're going to roll over Vandy. And look, man, Vandy lost to Georgia State and then turned around and did something awesome. I think they beat Alabama the next week after losing to Georgia State. Yeah. So don't that's a mental thing. Now this coaching staff's really good at keeping the guys focused, but I mean, there's been some inconsistencies through the years, and all that good stuff. A lot of it has to do with things that aren't necessarily coaching. The Ole Miss game last year, definitely there were some coaching decisions I think Shane Beamer would like to have back. But when you have Sellers just coming back off of an injury at about 80%, Rocket at 75%, you're playing against that defense. Ole Miss, one of the least talked about things in college football last year was how good the Ole Miss defense is. Ask Georgia ask Carolina about the Ole Miss defense. Walter Nolan and all that talent they had. That's a big question about this year with Ole Miss in my eyes, but we'll see. I mean, they're a portal school and they kind of just go and attempt to reload every year. So we'll see. They may be pretty good. But, that was not a typical performance when you talk about the Gamecocks. Ole Miss, Old Dominion in the regular season, and Illinois bowl game, kind of like Ole Miss in the sense they drove the ball and had chances to score and just couldn't. But bowl games are kind of as Dabo likes to say about the Gamecock game, a season unto itself. So, but Old Dominion and Ole Miss were atypical. The other 10, they kind of played consistently. They lost to Alabama and LSU, but that was that team. That was and we can rehash the LSU game, but we won't. So, I kind of look at the unevenness at times, and I get it. The Vandy game sets up as a trap. That game scares me to death, and it's probably because like the mental part of being a Gamecock. It's like you're kind of always waiting on the other shoe to drop just because it's happened. I mean, it's human nature. Lots of things in college football with fans and analysts and coaches and players, it's all human nature, and we attempt to explain it away with other things, myself included. So you kind of wait for the other shooter, but I think it's because Carolina's not lost to Vandy since 2008. For reference, that was the second football season we had the big spur 2 years before we went to there was a 24/7 sports. So how about that? Yeah, that was a long time ago, and the Gamecocks have beaten them every single year, and have had some scares, obviously, but that's one of those things. Now I'm not worried about Diego Pavia's bravado. I think I think he's kind of slit his own throat because fundamentally Vanderbilt kind of was like a jack in the box last year. Surprise, here's what we're doing, and nobody really saw it coming. I can guarantee you coaches around the SEC are just like they are with Sellers. You talk about watching the bowl game film over and over again is what I was told. But, they're going to kind of know they spent all summer watching this. So the talk and all that doesn't bother me. It's just the fact that they're a team, that they hang in the balance, and it's a lot. I hate to say it, a lot like playing Georgia Tech under Paul Johnson without the cut blocking and basic under center triple option. There's a lot of things they do. I saw it in the Missouri game last year when they took them to overtime. It's just like it's confusing. Carolina actually played Vandy as well as anybody last year on defense in particular. So to avoid the potholes and the unexpected, if you will, losses in early on, the defense is going to have to show up. So we'll see kind of how that goes, and that starts with game one. I mean, Virginia Tech has a lot of new players. These reports out of their camp seem to be pretty positive, renewed hope. So you have to get them off the field, or whatever you do on offense isn't really going to matter. And if you give up a bunch of big plays, that's points on the board in a lot of instances. So continuing on with the defense, we will talk about the defensive line. And, in a lot of cases, like when we've been talking about Rasul Faison, I've said, yes, he's a starter, but they have reserves and backups and other backs that are capable as long as they get blocking. And same with Faison, he's going to have to get blocking. But absolutely, he needs to be eligible because number one, it's fair. Number two, he's good. He's going to be the starter. He can make a difference, and all that. But at edge, defensive end, uh, Dylan Stewart, and it's not a surprise because he's Dylan Stewart, but far and away one of the most important. I mean, he's a strength of the defense, probably the strength of the defense. Very hard to block. I've seen a lot of reaction out there. Well, he's going to get double and triple teamed and all that, but that's fine. Number one, I don't know that he can't work his way around it and still make plays. Number two, when you have to block anybody that's just even sort of good, one on one, that's hard for offenses to do. There's a lot of double teams, and especially on the interior. So, I think if you're going to try to run the ball against the Gamecocks, provided they do tackle well in the perimeter with Kilgore and the corners are good tacklers. Uh, you try to like seal Dylan Stewart. I mean, I don't, good luck. I mean, I don't know that that's going to be something that is successful. I think that you have to account for Dylan, but I kind of see more of maybe teams playing a little more straight up, trying to maybe run away from him toward the other side, Brian Thomas Jr. And that kind of brings me, I've mentioned this, to probably my biggest concern about the defense. And maybe it's unfounded, and we'll see that it's not an issue. But that other edge against the run, and I can't repeat it enough. Kyle Kennard very good against the run last year. And I have not seen that type of performance out of Brian Thomas Jr. I've seen him rush the passer. And I think he's good at that, skilled. He's relentless. And I think he's a good pass rusher. But, if you're giving up rushing yards, you're not going to get to very many passing downs. So that's probably concern number one on the defense is the other edge. You do have JT Gear. You do have George Wilson has had a really good camp, the transfer from Campbell, but it's all been in the scope of rushing the passer, get off, all that good stuff. In the SEC and against the teams they play, Virginia Tech, they're going to try to run the ball. Most offenses are designed to do that. So we found out in 2023, when you don't seal the edge, what happens a lot of times. And so that's probably number one concern of mine, and I hope it's unfounded. Maybe it is. I haven't asked specifically about that. Desmond Umazulu is over there too, and they'll kind of go back and forth. and get a nice rotation for Sterling Lucas's group. The defensive tackle spot, this is probably concern number two, is depth. And it's not, I think they've got a nice, they mostly rotated three guys. I mean, Huntley and Tonka and TJ got most of the snaps last year, but you got a Monkel Goodwine coming in, Nick Barrett in the 4 games he played in, rotated in. DeAndre Jules, when healthy, rotated in. Rondarius Porter rotated in. And so, and gosh, I think I'm repeating myself here from a previous episode, or I'm getting a serious case of deja vu. But, they got bigger guys up there this year. They're all bigger. And, those guys wear out. You have to get them reps. Travian Robertson's going to have to rotate, plans to rotate again. And so after Nick Barrett, Brownlow Dindy, Monkel Goodwine, who's the fourth one? Troy Pikes, Devontae Miles. I do not think it will be Xavion Hardy. I mentioned Christian Ingram. And maybe it's picky a little bit. I mean, who's six deep at D tackle? Like legit six deep, And heading into last year, there were probably some questions, about, well, who's Monkel Goodwine? And he played 162 snaps last year and played it well. So the depth at D tackle, a concern I've seen brought up, and I don't think people are wrong. TJ Sanders and Tonka Hemingway, two of the better pass rushing, just pure pass rushing D tackles to have played at Carolina. Tonka was kind of a different guy. If there's anybody that's similar to him, it's probably Miles, but I've said before, wait for Aiden Harris to get here. There's your Tonka Hemingway replacement. That's the same kind of guy. So he was always a good pass rusher, played his best football at the end, 4th-round draft pick. TJ Sanders was unbelievable last year in all aspects. 51 tackles for a defensive tackle is high. I think 29 were solo. That guy's going to be talent-wise, TJ, just raw talent and ability. They've got guys that are just as talented, but it's the production and consistency with him that you're like, man, that guy brought it every. People don't understand how good he was. So one of these three bigger guys that they have in there, they're gonna have to replace that production, and I do think this group is going to be a little harder to move when teams try to run up the gut on them, along with 244-pound linebackers in there. So that's big, and the idea at D tackle sometimes is to keep, that's why they don't get that many individual tackles, is to keep the guards off of the linebackers so the linebackers can make the tackle. You guys have heard that before. And so the depth there, the other part of it I've heard mentioned is pass rushing at defensive tackle. Well, they're not going to be able to rush the passer. Well, if taking you back to 2013, if indeed they triple team Dylan Stewart, these guys can win one-on-one battles. Kelsey Quarles was a really good defensive tackle at South Carolina. Love Kelsey Quarles. Not a pass rushing guy like Tonka Hemingway skill set wise, I wouldn't say. Just a big physical guy that had some athleticism. That I think he had 9.5 sacks in 2013. So Kelsey got home because it was one-on-one. You force one-on-one matchups. So who amongst the defensive tackles has a pass rushing skill set, or the best pass rushing skill set among the three that, because I think Xavion Hardy in time is going to be a good pass rusher at defensive tackle. I think Devontae Miles in certain situations can be. I mentioned Aiden Harris coming in. I think Monkel Goodwine's that guy. If you watch him on film last year, he could get back, get by and get home. In other words, pressure in the quarterback. I don't know if he had any sacks or not, but he would get pressure. And I think as far as skill sets go, he's got it. Gabriel Brownlow Dindy really hadn't played enough for me to make that determination on film or anything, but obviously with the God-given athleticism and length he has, he could possibly be a guy as well. So there is some, there's not as much pass rushing skill set inside. Would I call it a concern? I don't know. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So, maybe your defensive tackles in certain years are more run stoppers than pass rushers. That happens. It happens to a lot of teams. So we'll see. So that would be, depth at that position, run defense at the other edge. These are all very technical things too. I mean, this is weird. I'm not like who's going to play safety. You know, you envision the ball going over everybody's head, right? If there's nothing, our people, a 10-yard gain turn it into 40 if you don't have good safeties. And I would add that safety to me, as far as concerns go, I think it's going to be fine. But we don't know. And then replacing a guy like Nick is, I don't know. You can't do it. So will they be a drop off individually? Yes, but collectively, could they still be good? Yeah, I think so. You got enough experience and talent back there. Overall, something I heard, picked up and had a couple of conversations about this yesterday was the defense has heard, the defensive guys have read all the stuff about, I mean, I mentioned the national media earlier, and when you hear them talk, that's what they talk about. And what does that mean to a current player on the team? That means, oh, you're not very good. And so that ticks them off a little bit. And I heard they're highly motivated. Clayton White's really motivated. If you kind of noticed Clayton White when he's spoken in the media, seems to be quietly confident. I know coaches being confident in the preseason mean nothing around here because you've had some times where, especially on that side of the ball, where it's been a disaster despite the confidence. But Clayton White's been done a really good job, and he's going into his 5th year. A lot of players that didn't necessarily start but have been in his scheme. Travian Robertson's really good. Sterling Lucas is really good. We mentioned Torian Gray. I think they'll be fine. There may be some bend but don't break. I'm not saying that style-wise, but I'm saying this defense may, they give up some plays, but the idea, if you're good on offense, which you hope they will be, is to get off the field, get the ball back to the offense. Turnovers are going to be a big key too, but they always are around here. And I don't talk a lot about turnovers because you can be a good team that works on forcing turnovers and you don't get them in a given year. Some years you didn't really even talk about it and you get a bunch. So we'll see what happens. But I'm bullish and confident on this defense. Will people look at it like they did last year? Like Mike Morgan thought it was the best defensive line in the country. And in the SEC, will it be that type of group? Probably not. Could it be really, really good again? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's your defense. So check out Shane Beamer later today, the morning show. Don't forget Clayton White and Mike Shula tomorrow as we get into simulated game week. This podcast is going to run a little late, a minute late today or so. It's 8:01 Eastern time. But it's been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. I'm out. Holla.
JC and Mad Dog Mully on the Gamecock Show.